So we welcome Carmen Carruthers, and Carmen has been with CUB, the acronym for since 2016, and she comes to this work with diverse experience in urban planning, education, sales, and financial services. And she's really passionate about making sure people have the information they need to save money, to make their homes more comfortable, and reduce their environmental impact. Carmen holds a bachelor's degree in local and urban affairs with a minor in environmental studies from St. Cloud University, and she has a master's degree in urban and regional planning from University of Iowa. Kevin also joins us as part of the CUB staff, and Kevin joined in September of 25 with a wealth of interesting experience. Kevin shared that he has worked in climate resilience planning and sustainability initiatives across Minnesota, working with Ramsey County's Climate Action Plan, Forest Carbon Program research up in Bemidji, greenhouse gas inventories, and even public acceptance of robots, which would be fun to hear about. So done a wealth of things. He comes with a master's in science from Science, Technology, and Environmental Policy from University of Minnesota's Humphrey School of Public Affairs, and a bachelor degree in science and environmental studies from Bemidji State University. So I welcome them both, and if there's anything I missed in your background, please share it with the group. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. We're really excited to be here. We'll get our slides up. We're going to do just a little bit of intro about our org, and then we're going to jump into the action steps that you can all consider. So just want to kind of give you a heads up. We're going to cover a wide range of topics that are important to the energy transition. So it's going to be pretty much like an overview, but we welcome questions throughout the presentation, and also know that there would be opportunities to reach out to us, later individually to talk about your particular, questions or concerns about your household as you're perhaps trying to participate in the transition. So we're going to cover a lot of information in a kind of a very overview way, but we're hoping it creates a really dynamic discussion amongst all of us. So thanks so much for having us. And if we go on to the next slide, we already did the intros of us, but we would love in the chat if you could share a little bit of information about yourselves. So we know this is a statewide org, so it's helpful for us to know, what geographies of the state are being represented here today, who your utility providers are. We're always curious about that, whether you're an investor-owned utility like Xcel and CenterPoint or Minnesota Power, or if you're part of a co-op or a municipal utility. They all operate a little bit differently. And then what you hope to learn from the presentation. So that's always useful for us. And if we go on to the next slide, just a little bit more about our org. We're a nonprofit consumer advocate organization. We're independent. We are not funded by utilities or state government. We're mostly funded through foundation grants. That's the primary focus, and individual donations. And then occasionally we'll have some special projects that help provide funding. We're really here to look out for the best interests of the consumer. So that independence is really critical for the way we do our work. And we do policy work and outreach work. And those kind of two topics really get merged together in how we're talking to people, and we understand what's important to be pushing at a utility level or a state level. So we really believe all people are entitled to affordable energy and fair treatment by their utilities. We're looking for rapid, cost-effective transition that benefits the public when it comes to clean energy. So sometimes we're a little bit different. We're not clean energy at all costs, right? We're trying to find this good balance where people's needs are addressed and that we make things affordable as we transition. And we also fight for transparency and accountability with the utilities across our state so that the consumers are being treated well. And then when we talk about our outreach services, this is what Kevin and I are doing day in and day out. We provide immediate support to Minnesotans who might be struggling to pay their bills, facing a shutoff, have questions, they're wondering why their bill is so high, they're like immediate stuff. People call us and we address the issue as quickly as we can. Another thing we do, and this is what a big part of what Kevin is doing, are free energy bill consultations. So you can set up 30 minutes with us and talk about any energy related question you might have. A lot of times it's about feeling like bills are higher, using more energy than a household would like, and what could they do about it? And a lot of that then transitions to energy efficiency improvements, making sure they're aware of programs that could benefit them, and moving towards electrification, which is something we're going to be talking about more this evening. And then our outreach services include presentations just like this. We give these talks across the state on a variety of topics. So please spread the word if you know of others who might be interested in having us help them out with topics they're interested in. We give more detailed workshops, and we are tabling at a lot of events across the state too. In fact, we'll be at the event on Summit. You can meet our colleague James when you guys are there. So we'll go on. So now these are some of the call to action suggestions that we wanted to present, and I'm going to put in the chat another link to this. Energy affordability is really important to our organization, and so we are sponsoring a bill to expand energy assistance and provide assistance during the summer months. Currently, energy assistance runs from October 1st to May 31st, but we know people also struggle to pay those high summer bills, especially when it comes to electricity. So we're really working hard to try to provide additional funding to help folks all year round and help more households as well. So you can scan the code. We put a link in, and we're going to talk more about energy affordability in the presentation as well. So you have a little deeper understanding of how important this is. But just real briefly, energy assistance provides like a primary benefit going directly to someone's energy bill. It also provides emergency assistance. So when people have used up their benefit and they have a shut-off notice, they can get additional what's called crisis funding to avoid that shut-off or to get the power turned back on. And another amazing benefit is that if you are a homeowner on energy assistance and your heating system goes out, energy assistance will fix it or replace it for free. So this is huge in like keeping people safe and comfortable in their homes. Almost half of the recipients are 60 years or older. 40% have a disability. 16% have a child in the home. So this is really helping people who obviously need it. There's a lot more people eligible for energy assistance than actually receive it. And then about a little less than 5,000 furnace repairs have happened because of this. So very impactful. Okay, and the next call to action that you can consider is our organization is currently helping provide funds directly to folks who are experiencing economic
Wait, Carmen,
hardship.
Carmen, wait, I don't mean to interrupt. Did we
Sure.
give the call to action on on contacting the representative for the energy
Yes, I'm
assistance?
sorry, I didn't say that out loud. I was figuring you guys were reading that. But yes, the call to action would be to contact your representative using that QR code or going to the link that we put in the chat. Yeah, thanks, Kevin, for catching that. We're a good team in helping each other out, so we're not missing stuff. And then the next call to action option would be to either donate to the Lights on Homes Warm Fund or refer people to who might need it. This fund is aimed to help Minnesota households who have been impacted, by recent events and who are struggling with their bills. And we are not collecting much information. It's really available to anybody who needs help with their bills. So this has been a really big effort of ours the last couple months, and we appreciate you spreading the word about it, both for funding purposes and to refer people to us so we can get them signed up. It's giving $250 towards an electric bill and $250 to a natural gas bill, one-time gift. So also really important program. And we've been really happy to partner with people to get this up and going. Okay. So with that, we are going to just jump into the content. So first, we want to just mention like, what is the clean energy transition? And for us, it means that we are implementing energy efficiency improvements that reduce energy waste and also improve home comfort and health. That home appliances are powered by a cleaner energy grid than we have now. And importantly, that it's affordable for people. So we have affordable and convenient rates and electricity rates in particular, because the idea is that we will be switching away from fossil fuels towards a cleaner grid fueled that uses electricity. Okay. All right. And I think it's important to recognize like a lot needs to be done for this to happen. And so there's going to be investment required if we're going to have an increased load in our electric grid. That means we need additional generation and we need to make grid and transmission upgrades to get that generation to where it's needed. The cost of individual household adoption is a challenge, and it's going to be really important that we ensure an equitable transition and address that challenge because everyone needs to be part of this. The other big thing that we have to keep in mind is the speed at which this would need to happen to meet climate goals, and then the reality of how quickly can we really do this. So these are all sort of the tensions that we're holding as we work towards these really important goals. Okay, so that's kind of the framing. We're gonna dive into some of this in more detail now. Kevin's gonna talk about climate change and energy trends to give you grounding like in the science and the energy world. Then we're gonna transition to talk about home electrification. So what can individual households do to participate in this transition and make their own individual impact? We're also going to talk about energy affordability because remember, we want all of these things to work together. And then we're just going to also have that call to action again, another opportunity for you to see that information and conclude. And we would enjoy taking questions throughout the presentation. So I think some of our hosts are going to help kind of track that for us. And we'll do our best to answer throughout the presentation because we feel like if one person has a question, others often do too. Okay, so with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kevin.
All right. Yeah. So I'm going to be talking about the climate change and energy trends here in Minnesota. Oops, whoops. There we go. All right. All right. So they had to hold me back from including more graphs. So count yourselves lucky that there was someone there to save you from all my charts and graphs. But I think the big takeaway here that I think people should get is that electricity generation is no longer the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions here in Minnesota. So you can, oh my goodness, you can see that they are ranked from left to right from the current highest source of greenhouse gas emissions. So transportation is the highest, but from 2005 to 2023, it's gone down about 9% net. Agriculture stayed about the same, but that's the second highest. And electricity generation, you can see that that's had kind of a journey that it's gone on. It used to be far and away the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions back in 2005. Yes, applause, absolutely, Anna, absolutely. Um, it's gone down to the third biggest source now. It's pretty steep decline there. Really good looking curve for those of us who like climate action. And a lot of that transportation is going to be made up of the lighter duty vehicles and a lot of the electricity generation greenhouse gas emissions. That's going to be coal and natural gas and all those fossil fuels still, because they use natural gas to generate the electricity and coal and things like that. So how did that happen? Back in 2001, our Minnesota's electric grid, our electric generation was mostly coal. It was about 2/3 coal, a little bit of renewables there, and nuclear was kind of pulling most of the weight for the carbon-free electricity. And natural gas back then wasn't used quite as much just because fracking hadn't been invented and the prices weren't as good, so they were using coal more. But we flash forward to 2025, and holy cow, we have renewables as with the plurality on the grid, the largest source. Renewables aren't yet a majority, but you can see that carbon-free is a majority. So we have, what is that? Some like 58% of our electric generation in 2025 was from carbon-free sources. You can see that natural gas has taken up a much larger proportion and coal has taken up a much smaller proportion. And again, that's going to be some of the economics that we talk about. It's not really been, for better or worse, it's not really been a lot of climate action policy that's been driving that. It's been a lot of economic pressures that have done that. And we'll take a look at that. And this slide, I just wanted to quickly include just as a victory lap to show that Minnesota is doing better than the current average US state, and we have been for quite some time. So just a little woohoo Minnesota moment, just pausing for a victory. We're doing all right. There's lots of challenges, but we're doing all right, all things considered. All right, and here they are. Let's get into this is some of the economic pressures that that I was mentioning. So this you might have seen a chart like this before in your climate action career here, but this is called the levelized cost of electricity. And there's sorry, I should explain. So the levelized cost of electricity, also called the LCOE, sometimes LCOE, they calculate it's basically a number that represents the cost of electricity per megawatt, per unit of electricity generated over its lifetime. So they factor in how much does it cost to build that source of generation, and how much does it cost to operate it, and then also they factor into it the capital costs and things like how do they finance it and the interest and the debt and things like that. So all of that is included in this model here. So it shows the ranges because there's so many variables that go into it that they don't like to just give a number or an average. They really like to show the ranges and show that there's highs and lows to these sorts of things. So some of the things that I want to point out is that, like it says in the header, renewable energy remains the most cost competitive option for new generation. So if we're talking about if we're going to build something for the electric generation for the grid, renewable energy is going to win, subsidized or unsubsidized. So that's great news. But the question that policymakers are faced with right now is more often, I mean, they are talking about building, more combined cycle, et cetera. But a bigger question right now is whether or not we keep current gas plants, current coal plants, current nuclear plants running, or whether we shut them down right now and replace them. So, you'll hear a lot of people talk about the clean energy transition in that clean energy has been more additive than it has been a replacement. So there's been clean energy added, in record amounts every year, but greenhouse gas emissions still rise, and that's because there's still fossil fuels being added and there's still fossil fuels on the grid. So what I want you to take away from this is that, oh, sorry, I should point out at the bottom, those orange numbers with the asterisks. I don't know if you can see my mouse on the screen, but those orange numbers at the bottom with the asterisks, those are going to represent the cost of running that current existing plant. So it doesn't include the cost of building it. So we can see that there's a lot of cost competition here, and in a lot of ways, like this gas combined cycle, if it's an existing plant, it's going to be really cost competitive to generate electricity that way versus building new renewables, subsidized or unsubsidized. But there is when you introduce subsidies, there's a lot more cost competitiveness, and renewables win in a lot more cases, even against those existing plants. All right, I should move on from that guy. Yeah, so there's even with that good news about, that positive renewable economic pressure, like I said, regardless of climate policy, there's going to be that pressure to move towards renewables as an economic pressure. But there's still a lot to be done, and there's still a lot of investments to be made and a lot of hard choices. So I don't know if you're familiar with Princeton's Net Zero America study. They lay out 5 different paths to decarbonization, different pathways that have more land use or more renewables or biofuels or things like that. And one lucky takeaway from that is that in all 5 of those decarbonization pathways where America is net zero by 2050, the cost of electricity and the cost of electric services isn't the main limiting factor. And I think that's great news. So we're talking about the fact that the US spends maybe 4 to 5 to 6% of its GDP on energy services in a year. And all of these paths to decarbonization, they're projected to use that much or less every year. So the clean energy transition according to Princeton and their Net Zero America study, it's not going to be costing us more than we're already spending right now on energy. So I just want to lead with that as very good news. But there's still plenty of things to do. Like if we're going to electrify and decarbonize, then the grid that we've built over 150 years, it's taken us 150 years to build this grid. We're going to need to double it in size to decarbonize, and we're going to need to do that in 15 years. So what took us 150 years to build, we're going to need to build it again in 15 years. But we have a lot of advantages on our side. We have a lot better power tools and things like that. We have a lot better capital, and so there's a lot of good news, but there's so much to be done in terms of transmission lines and different policy choices, and all of that is going to still cost money. We have to do that in the right way and think about affordability as we go through that. All right, and we're going to move into the home scale here. So we've talked about a lot of the economic pressures and the energy systems and the markets and things like that, and the way that clean energy is moving through Minnesota. Oh, there's so much more to talk about, but we're going to zoom into the household level here to talk about what can a individual household do to kind of disambiguate from all of this big energy systems talk. So according to the Minnesota Pollution Control Agency, the biggest source of greenhouse gas emissions in your home is still from that natural gas. It's from your natural gas heater, the dryer, the water heater, and things like that that will be covering. But they don't include the coal and the natural gas from electricity generation in this, just because that would be double counting and double dipping. So what I want you to take away from this is that you can replace this top bar here. You can replace this natural gas. If we electrify, we're replacing something that's 100% natural gas with something that's mostly carbon free, that's a plurality renewable energy, that still has about a fifth of coal, about a fifth of natural gas using it to power it, but you're replacing that 100% natural gas with something that's much, much cleaner, and it's only going to get cleaner and cleaner. So let's talk about some electrification now.
Great. And I did notice there was a question about
Oh,
the
sorry.
impacts of incoming Minnesota data centers. So maybe Kevin and I can tag team a little bit on this.
Yeah.
Yes, so the increased need for energy to fuel these data centers is obviously a big concern. Like what kind of energy is going to be used? So
Mhm.
that's really important and getting a lot of attention across the state and the country. One
Mhm.
thing CUB did do, though, we helped with legislation last year to make sure that the data centers themselves pay for themselves, that our rates as residential consumers would not be directly impacted by the increased demand caused by data centers. So that's a little bit of good news with that. I know, Kevin, if you want to touch a bit more on like the climate
There's,
piece of
you
that.
know, there's definitely a lot of talk around the climate impacts of AI and data centers, which is really good. But I think that, if you compare an AI prompt to a cheeseburger, you'd be shocked at how many AI prompts it would take to rival the noble cheeseburger. Um, but not to say that it's not going to be hugely impactful. I'm not trying to diminish that. I'll say that I'll believe it when I see it, but data centers have been proposed to be a grid resource. So they have generation capacity, they have storage, they have backup capacity. So it's been proposed that they serve as somewhat of a distributed grid resource. And I don't think we have enough time to get into that. And I'm not enough of an expert to get into that, I think. But I've heard that proposed, and that's always been an interesting idea to me. So there's room potentially for data centers to be a grid asset, but that's to say nothing of the water usage or living near it or a million other things and the capital costs.
Yeah, yeah, it's a
Yeah,
very
Paul.
complex issue.
Yeah. Yeah, Paul, do you have a question?
Yeah, I'm here in North Dakota. I
Hmm.
just want to bring the subject of geothermal energy into the discussion
Hmm.
Yep.
because data centers and geothermal energy can work very well together. When we look at our capacity in the underground here, it's about 49 gigawatt for the state. We have a generation portfolio of about 10 gigawatt right now. So in our substrata. I mean, go down below the mantle there, we can get about 5 times more energy.
Mhm.
The data centers that we have, they are actually, or we will be having, and they are being built right now. They will actually be very useful for intermittent generation sources like wind and solar, depending, of course, of how you load these data centers. So
Mhm.
you can shift load, data processing load, to, say, North Dakota when the wind blows in the middle of the night. And because you can do things like that, you can level out your power curve. Also, you can make sure that you don't have generation assets just standing around
Mhm.
and producing energy that will, I should say, not be used, or they have to turn them off. They have to curtail them in
Mhm.
order to stay on the grid. So the data processing centers could become a real good asset for us
Yeah.
because you can push all that data processing requirement during times when the wind blows, during times when the sun shines, and you don't
Mhm.
have great loads. And I think that's a real interesting development. And we're working strongly on it here as CCL in North Dakota, on getting that
Yeah.
energy out of the some 30,000 abandoned wells
Yeah,
that we
exactly.
have, right? 30,000 of them. Each of them could probably, I mean, idealistically speaking, get 3, 4, 5 megawatts out of each of these wells.
Yeah,
Um,
geothermal is very promising for a lot of decarbonizing those sectors like an emergency center or those data centers,
yeah,
those things that you want to keep running, even though, like you said, you can keep it intermittent at the data center. But geothermal, I think, is a really great option. And in Minnesota, we have some really cool geothermal stuff happening. Darcy Solutions, if you guys want
yeah.
to look that up, they have some really incredible stuff with their dipole, really incredible geothermal innovation. Thank you so
Okay.
much for sharing, Paul.
Yeah,
Yeah.
you're most welcome. I think we really need to work on getting geothermal off the ground, out of the ground.
Yeah, out of the ground.
Not off the
Yeah,
ground, but
I
out
see
of,
what you did there. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah. Forgive me, I'm a foreigner, I don't know the English
No,
language too
no,
much.
that was a good pun. I like that.
Okay. All right
Great.
then.
Yeah, well, thank you. And again, like, this whole the amount of electricity we need to generate and how it's used, like just, so many things to be thinking about. But we're going to focus now like on your home, your neighbors' homes, everybody's households. If we're talking about working towards reducing the fossil fuel use in our homes, it's important to know how we currently use energy. So over half of the energy in Minnesota in a typical home is heating and cooling. Not a surprise, right? Most of the year, we're having to do one of those things. Water heating's another 15%. Appliances, so that's washer, dryer, stove, fridge, microwave, on and on. That's another 15. Lighting's only about 10, thanks to LED lights. We probably shouldn't call it the light bill anymore. People still do, but lighting is a much smaller part of our electricity use currently. And electronics surprises people is only about 5%. All of our gadgets and stuff tend to be pretty efficient. Of course, it matters, how many you have and how much they're operating, but they're not the large energy users you might think that they are. So this is important as we start to identify how can we reduce fossil fuel use in our homes and switching to different technologies to meet these needs. So if we go on to the next slide, just wanting you all to think a little bit about how do you heat your home? Here's all the options. There's lots of options out there. Forced air furnaces are probably the most common thing, fueled by natural gas across the state. People have boilers, especially in older homes, so that's the radiator heat. Some folks have electric resistance. This happens to be more common in rural areas because it tends to be one of the most expensive ways to heat your home, not very efficient and expensive. Heat pumps, which we're going to talk more about that, an electric way of heating, or geothermal heat pumps as well. And fireplaces and wood stoves are also used, sometimes as primary, often like as kind of supplemental heat. And then we think about how do we cool our homes. We go on to the next slide. Kind of similar, we have forced air conditioning, so the central heating. If you have a gas furnace, you likely have central air. Window air conditioning, again, heat pump is another option, and fans, or just opening your windows. Okay. And then we talk about how do you heat your water? Do you have a gas water heater? That's super common if you have a gas furnace. Most likely you have a gas water heater too, and different efficiency levels. You may have an electric resistance tank. So this is just a standard electric water heater, not particularly efficient, but doesn't use gas. You can have on-demand water heaters. That picture isn't right. They're not tanks. Usually, they're much smaller. They're just heating as you need to go along. And then we have heat pump water heaters too. So we're going to just now kind of talk about like this heat pump technology as being a really critical option for folks to switch and use less natural gas and switch to electricity. What a heat pump does, it actually transfers energy. It doesn't create it. That's why it is like super efficient. So in the summertime, a heat pump will take the heat from inside your house and move it outside. In the winter, even in negative degree temperatures, depending on the type of heat pump you have, there's what's called a cold climate air source heat pump. It can go into the negative teens and still through, the miracle of physics, pull that heat from those very cold temperatures and transfer it into your homes. Secondary systems are typically necessary though, because for those very frigid days we get, heat pumps will not be able to meet the demand all the time. So, but for secondary systems, you could go all electric, or you could maintain your gas appliances too. And then there's heat pump water heaters, same technology, but it's used to heat your water. So it's taking the surrounding air and transferring that into your tank in heating water. And then you often have the option of having electric resistance backup when demand is high and you don't want to run out of hot water. So just this is a great example of how you could use less fossil fuel and still meet, over half of your energy needs, heating, cooling, and water heating. And if we go on to the next slide, there's also opportunities with other appliances in your home to use less energy or switch the fuel. So looking for Energy Star rated appliances or buying the most efficient things you can afford so you're using less. Take advantage of rebates when you're looking to replace things and use your appliances efficiently. So run full loads in your washer, dryer, dishwasher, right? Take off the heated drying option on your dishwasher and open up the door instead. And consider electric alternatives especially when it gets time to replace things. If you have a gas stove, maybe you want to think about getting an induction or just a standard electric. Looking for an electric dryer instead of a gas dryer. And if we go on to the next slide, we also just sort of want to recognize we are not shy that the fact that making these changes can be quite expensive, right? And it feels daunting. But I think it's also important to recognize that our homes have been evolving, right? Since we started building them. There's old homes that maybe some of you live in that used to have wood stoves and now you have central heating. And maybe they didn't even have plumbing and now there's plumbing, right? We are constantly upgrading our homes over time. And moving towards electrification, you could think of it as just another example of a technology change that we're making in our homes to make our homes more comfortable and more climate friendly, and hopefully more efficient and less energy intensive as well. Okay, so again, recognizing that transitioning can take a lot of work and planning and expense. So, and knowing that not everybody has the resources to participate in the same way or at the same pace because switching out things. I don't know if any of you have gotten a quote to replace a heating system or water heater lately, but these are thousands of dollars that you have to spend to keep your equipment in good shape. 18K, yes. It is not inexpensive. So we really coach people in our work, like when Kevin's doing the bill consultations about the planning aspect and anticipating. The ideal time, just from the kind of a household budget standpoint, is making these switches when you would otherwise replace your equipment. And maybe a little preemptively too to avoid an emergency situation, because a lot of the times we replace our equipment is when it fails. And then we're in a panic. We don't have the time to really think, do the research, do the cost comparisons, figure out what we want to live with for the next 10 to 20 years. So we really encourage people to start thinking ahead and having, some control over what's going to be in your home. This table indicates like how long of a lifespan is expected for these major systems in your home. A furnace is going to last you about 20 years. A heat pump will be about 15, a boiler 20 to 40. You have a water heater can be anywhere from like 8 to 12 years. So the point is, like, when it comes to replacing it, you're going to be living with these things for a decade or two. So you want to really be thinking about that and making the best choices you can with information that you have and what your budget allows. There can be a lot of complications when you switch. So just as simple as going from a gas water heater to an electric water heater, couple key steps you're going to have to think about. You're going to have to seal off the gas lines, and you're going to have to make sure you have the proper outlet in your space where the water heater is to take on an electric water heater. And you got to make sure your electric panel can handle it, right? So these things take some planning, and in an emergency situation, it gets kind of tough and rough, and you might, be without hot water for a few days, and ideally you avoid that. So we just really want to kind of point out some of these logistical things each household has to deal with as they move to transition, and that it can be done, but you want to be thoughtful and planning for it. We also need to recognize too, like, renters don't have the same opportunities to do this because they are not going to be the ones who make the equipment choices. But there's little things renters can do. So for example, they might have a gas stove. They can use that gas stove less. They could get an induction hot plate. They could be using crock pots more, using toaster ovens, things like that. So there are some opportunities, but they're less. Okay, and then we're going to go on to the next slide. The thing we really like to promote is weatherizing your home, which means having enough insulation and sealing up those air leaks is a very cost-effective thing to do. And it's really one of the first things you should do in an ideal world. You get an audit, you follow through with the recommendations to make your home well weatherized. And what's wonderful about this is it saves you money starting right as soon as it's done today and into the future. And then when you're working towards electrifying, you're using even less of that energy going forward. So it makes it more cost-effective long term. And we're not really talking about renewables here, but if you're doing solar panels, for example, having a well-insulated home means you need fewer panels to actually power your home. So that is a really wise move to make as well. Also important to know that there's various incentives and programs required by state law that your utility needs to provide to help with the costs of these investments in energy efficiency. And for income qualified households, there's also free or deeply discounted programs that can help make this more affordable. And individual cities and communities also can offer really good incentives. So City of Minneapolis, St. Louis Park, Edina, they have some really generous benefits to work towards electrification and home efficiency. Okay, we'll move on to the next one. So just to kind of recap this thing, like, in order for this home electrification trend to continue and to, gain more speed, we need our energy to be affordable. Electricity rates need to be affordable. We need to invest in the right forms of energy generation so that they stay affordable and meet the needs that we have. And we want to make sure that upgrades are also cost effective and attainable to households, so they have the option of making these switches. And it's going to be really important to provide support to bring everybody along on the journey. And then next, we're going to touch base, just revisit some of these affordability issues, just to put some context into why we talk about affordability so much when it comes to the energy transition. So we've been tracking how far behind people are on their bills for investor-owned utilities. So these are the big utilities in our state, plus Dakota Electric, because they've chosen to be regulated even though they're a co-op. So this is like Minnesota Power, Otter Tail, Minnesota Energy Resources, Gas, CenterPoint Gas, those folks. And you will see since the pandemic that arrearages, which means how far behind you are on your bills, has remained steadily high, stubbornly high. That there are over $100 million in past due bills. This is really big money and how much people owe on their bills. And if we go to the next slide, another kind of way of looking at this is to look at the amount of disconnections that happen on an annual basis. Again, this being the regulated utilities. We don't have the data of the folks who live in co-op territory or municipal utilities, how often they're getting shut off. We know it happens. We just don't have the data is readily available. But you can see just huge spikes since 2020. And the reason 2020 is so suppressed is there was a moratorium against shutoffs during the pandemic. So that dip is because they were not allowed to be shut off. And then we have, steadily increasing post-pandemic and kind of leveling off right now. But again, stubbornly high. We're talking about over 80,000 households getting shut off each year. It's a lot. Okay, we'll go on to the next slide. And this is where Kevin is going to resume.
Yeah. So we've gone through a lot. We've talked about the Minnesota energy transition and what's going on with the electric generation and the different decisions that individual households can make. But at the end of the day, like Carmen said, you can't electrify your home reliably if electric rates are super high. So that's one of the things we need to focus on here. So how can we make these utility bills more affordable for Minnesotans so that it is more feasible for people to electrify? So I'm going to start with monitoring utilities and pushing for transparency. So I can kind of talk about what CUB does and then what some of the things, the way that maybe you can fit into it as a household. So CUB has our policy and our outreach team. So our policy team is going to like intervene in rate cases and regulatory proceedings. And CUB's outreach team is going to be hearing people's stories in our consultations and in our inquiries and passing that along and weaving that into our policy work. But one of the things you can do is just be watchful and diligent of your utility bills and the things that your utility is doing and look out for rate increases and things like that. And if you live in the territory of a regulated utility here in Minnesota, you can look out for those rate cases and comment on those rate cases if you care to, and let the Public Utility Commission let them know how it would affect you and what you think and things like that. That's one of the things you can do to monitor utilities and push for transparency. You can talk to your legislators about good policies, like we've been saying, expand the energy assistance program and other good policies. And then advocating for a clean energy transition is going to keep the bills down, like we said, because we need to build out the grid no matter what. There's going to be increased demand and from electrification or from data centers. In any case, there's going to be more electricity that needs to be built. So we can either build things that use fuel that we pay for or that are free to operate, more or less, that use electricity, that if we're building new electricity, that renewables are really going to be the way to keep our bills down. Expanding the affordability programs to help people pay their energy bills. I'm going to kind of tie that into implementing efficiency projects because there's programs that will help people pay their bills, and there's programs to help people to make efficiency affordable, to make weatherization affordable, and I think they're both really, really important. Efficiency is going to keep rates down because the less electric demand there is, the less infrastructure and generation they feel like they need to plan for and build, and the lower your rates will be because it's when they build that infrastructure, that's how your rates go up at the end of the day. And so if we all have more efficient homes that use less energy, then they need to build less energy, and then the bill will cost less because your rates will be lower. They'll need to charge you a lower rate. And you'll also your bill will be lower because your energy usage is lower. So obviously they're charging you for using less energy and all that. And then I guess we circled back to our call to action here. I think that we moved it back to the beginning. Carmen, what do you think? Should we open it up for questions at this point, or do you want to like tie things back up with energy assistance like now that we're through mostly?
Yeah, I think we can kind of tie it up.
Okay.
But we can kind of have those slides toggling a little bit if folks want a little more time to react. Well, we can also share these slides too, and I guess it'll be recorded, so folks will have more opportunities. Yeah. Yeah, so maybe just slowly go to the next slide and just as a reminder about supporting energy assistance,
Mhm.
and then also supporting the fund by that's helping people struggling with bills, either by donating or referring folks to get help. And then the last slide, we have some additional like contact info, like get signed up for our newsletter, reach out for a bill
Oh, yeah.
consultation with Kevin, and any kind of question you have, you can contact us. Yeah, so we'd
I
love,
know it was a lot to go through. It was a lot
yeah,
to, it's very climate action itself is so intersectional that it's difficult to tell a succinct story about affordability in the climate action space, but I hope that we told a focused enough story for you here today.
Yeah, thank you. So now let's open it up for Q&A. So
Yeah.
feel free to raise your hand or jump in if that works better.
There are a few things in the chat. I don't know if Carmen or Kevin, you can see those.
sure. Yeah, it looks like there was a question about nuclear options too. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I'll just say, like, we at Cub, we don't have like a clear policy position on nuclear. I think as people know, like there's perceived pros and cons to it, but it's been a very steady source of clean energy, carbon-free energy for many years. So when Kevin was showing those charts of like how we generate electricity, you'll notice because we haven't built any more nuclear, it's stayed really constant and steady. And it's been a really important part of our kind of our core baseline power that we have. And I think it has been interesting. You're hearing more about nuclear. I would say like in the last 5 years it's really been popping up a lot more. So we're kind of curious to see like where those discussions are going to head.
And Minnesota keeps extending the lifespan of those nuclear plants. I mean, I think they were originally set to be decommissioned like 20 years ago or something like that, and they just keep extending the commissioned life of them. So there's going to be some decisions coming up here soon. So it's
Yeah.
definitely a great question.
Yeah. It looks like Michael has his hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to say thank you. It was a very, very good presentation, and I'm
Thank
really
you.
grateful for it. I was curious when you just had that slide up with the levelized cost of energy or electricity.
Mhm.
Um, one of the things that came to mind for me is um, I know that there's the push on to raise or to lift the moratorium on nuclear in Minnesota, and I'm kind of ambivalent about it because I think of it as a solution that certainly could help, but it ain't going to happen for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the questions that I have is when you look at the U.S. nuclear uh, cost of levelized cost, do you know, does that include decommissioning as well?
That is such a great question, and I don't know for sure whether or not it includes decommissioning. I imagine that it does because I think they try and include as much as they can in their models. I will say that they had trouble with geothermal and with nuclear for this particular analysis because there wasn't a tremendous there's obviously not there's not a lot of new nuclear coming onto the grid, so they don't have the data points to kind of say that in 2025 like this is what the levelized cost would be to build nuclears. They don't have like very good data on that, and there's not enough geothermal data as well.
Sure.
But I think that yeah, I don't know if it includes the decommissioning, to be honest. But
Well,
it does look like it's on the higher end of energy costs,
oh,
comparatively, doesn't it?
absolutely. I always thought it was even higher than peaker plants, but I've
Hmm.
I've been proven wrong here. I, I was going to say that today in the news, the governor of Maine signed the plug-in balcony solar law in
Hmm.
Maine.
Hmm.
And that is something that I put information in the chat about that. I also put information in there about the legislative effort that's being championed by Larry Kraft
Hmm.
at the state legislature and some of his colleagues to introduce and pass model rules and regulations to help virtual power plants thrive in Minnesota. I realize that you have a small staff and you're stretched really far. But I was curious, is Cub looking at all about at the opportunity to piggyback with Solar United Neighbors work to try to help move those pieces of legislation forward? Because I think they can be really powerful ways to help everybody in the state benefit from renewables and help make it more affordable for everybody.
Yeah, Carmen, do you know if we're sorry, I don't know if you're
Yeah. I will say it's not one of our priority legislative topics. I can say that much. I'm not 100% sure if we've gotten involved with it or not. Um,
we might
yeah,
have
so
gotten
like
involved coalitionally, maybe. There might be some
maybe.
coalition.
Yeah, we're not, to my knowledge, we're not like independently working on that. So like in this kind of clean energy space, a lot of our like partner orgs, we all kind of take on different topics and take lead roles in different
Hmm.
topics. And then we will support each other sometimes. Sometimes we'll have different opinions. It's not all the same all the time. And so I would say like as an org, we're less involved in like solar issues specifically often because like there's other groups who are taking a really active role and have more expertise in the area. But we can get back to you and let you know if we're involved in that legislature. Our
Hmm.
executive director takes care of all like the lobbying type issues for our org.
That'd be greatly appreciated, and I hope that it's something that might fit into your wheelhouse really well. Thank you.
Me too.
Mike, or Mike or Michael, I posted some information in the chat about Minnesota having some legislation in progress as well as other states for what Sun's putting together.
Thank you, Mark. I know, and I think that um, with any luck at all, the plug-in solar might get through this session. It's kind of a long shot, but
Hmm.
it's got a possibility. And the virtual power plant bill, I know it's going to take a year or two to get forward, move forward, but it is it's a really good thing to happen. And they actually passed that same legislation in the state of Virginia last year, as the first state in the nation. And it really should happen all across the U.S., but Solar United Neighbors has targeted Minnesota as one of the four other states they're really trying to push it through in. So it's a great opportunity for us. So
Yeah.
enough said. Don't mean to
You-
take too much time.
yeah, sure. Utah has it cleared too. They were the first, and the
Yep.
interesting thing there is they have a GOP governor.
Yep. Bright red state.
See, I mean, like that's what I'm saying. The economic pressures of renewables. Oh man, I wish I could have covered this. Just on April 3rd from Pew Research Center. There's a you guys gotta see this from Pew Research. This new polling came out April 3rd that showed that the erosion of support for renewable energies, and you can see they break it up by Democrat and Republican and U.S. adults. And the Republicans from like the year 2000 to the year now, just in the 5 or 6 years, it just completely switches from majority support for renewables to majority disapproval. And there's been a steady erosion of support for renewable energies in the past 5 or 6 years, and we've lost bipartisan support for renewable energies. So, I mean, I opened my mouth to say that, like you see, there's so many good economic pressures that even very red states are getting involved with climate action, and it's crossing political divides. But we're seeing that slowly erode, unfortunately. It used to be so much more true that everyone could be on board with free energy, free renewable energy. Ugh.
You could lose your hair doing this, Kevin.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. I wonder what that would be like.
So, any more questions for our guests? All
Yeah,
right.
Tim.
Yeah, Tim, do you want to ask your
Oh,
question?
sure. Yeah, I didn't know I was on. So, um, with the levelized cost, I noticed that there's no accounting for the impact on health, the impact on other
Mm-hmm.
things.
Yep.
So, one has to keep in mind when looking at this that it's leaving out some very important factors there. And so
Bravo.
a lot of
Yes.
these things would change a lot. And that's part of what's happening now. The message isn't getting out about
Mm-hmm.
this. That's all I had to say. So.
No, such a good point that gets overlooked. It's, all these economic stuff. It's like the externalities, the perennial difficulty of dealing with all these economic terms is they try to externalize everything and say that's not a part of the model. Oh, the co-localization of a coal plant on a burdened community, giving everyone asthma and raising healthcare costs and cancer from the mercury and the heavy metals and the wet deposition into our lakes and all that. That is not represented well enough at all, if at all, in these models. So I think that's a really amazing point that should be talked about more. So thank you.
All right. Anything else? All right, Michael.
I can add a little context about the data center thing in Minnesota, but I don't want to take time that isn't available. And
I'd
I
love to hear
Well, yeah. So maybe
personally.
what I'll do is I'll just call the official Cub part of the meeting over, and let's just go into the open forum. And so Cub folks, we would love to have you stick around, and but this will kind of be more a more casual chat now.